The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Hey, good morning and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Coaching Network. My name is Ray Arell. This is episode 73. So we've been together talking about Agile and Agile coaching things for some time now. So it's always fun to think about, well, wow, 73 episodes and that are now in the podcast form, which is really cool. This event, both the live event and the podcast, is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. The Agile Alliance, if you don't know who they are, they're an organization that formed up shortly right after the signing of the Agile Manifesto. Originally, when they first formed up, they started running the original Agile conference that grew in from a bunch of smaller group of people getting together to then several thousand people getting together, all talking about Agile and Agile practices. As the nonprofit aged over the years, it aged like a fine bottle of wine, and it started making investments in all of us. And in particularly how to go accomplish their mission through making investments like getting together like with the Agile Coaching Network or other events that they sponsor. Like if you go to like a local chapter of an Agile working group or a community of practice within your neighborhood and you use the meetups system, you might want to check to see who might be funding that, because that could be the Agile Alliance. I have been a member for a number of years. I've done work for them as volunteers. I've even worked for them for a number of years. Give them a look. They are well worth it. The membership is like $49 a month per individual. Please take advantage of that. There's a lot that they offer. I'm joined with a group of co-hosts that help us to kick off the conversation. Conversations that we start typically is with a lead-in question, and then that lead-in question kind of evolves through the remainder of the hour. I could not do this work without my co-hosts. If you think of getting us to get to a conversation about things, these people are absolutely brilliant. Shauna, Hendrik, Jorg, Diana, you are all what helped to make the Agile Coaching Network, I think, great, as well as you are all luminaries in the community. And I very much appreciate you being here religiously sometimes. I'm not sure if it's religious, but mostly religiously at times when we need to come together and have these conversations. I look forward to this. I'm pleased to say that I saw some of the podcast data, and we are one of the top 5% Agile podcasts that are out there. That comes from all of you as listeners. So please, if you ever miss this, or if you want to hear the conversation again, you can always go and just subscribe and hit like. That way we're able to share the value and amplify it across the community. So to kick us off today, I want to talk about coaching, and in particularly good coaching and some of the anti-patterns that we see in coaching. And over the years, I've had exposure to different ways and approaches, and I've been, as a mentee up underneath some really great mentors, just the whole, how do we approach this sort of this fine line of when we're kind of going between, I think, three bubbles. And those three bubbles are the mentoring bubble, the coaching bubble, and the consulting bubble. And in mentoring, we are very much in an advisory role. Somebody has their agenda and they're asking, hey, I'm looking for advice. I'm looking for ways of how do I approach something. And it's very important to know that you're in that relationship, because in that case, the advising is being driven by the individual who has some learning objectives. They have some things that they want to accomplish. And we're advising them off of that list. When we get into coaching, there's also most of the time an agenda that's in the middle of this. Go off and say, we want to adopt Scrum, or we want to adopt some framework, or we want to do something. The agenda's there. That's the vision of where they want to go. And we use, if some of you who are more familiar with the coaching tone, we ask these bigger open-ended questions and helping people to figure out ways that they can accomplish their agenda. And that sometimes has sort of a mixed bag, especially if you're new to coaching or you have a particular coaching stance. that becomes more or less more like a consulting model. And consulting model is very much telling people what to go do. I hear all the time, and we were talking a little bit in the pre-session about how sometimes when people are carrying in their own agenda into a coaching session, and that even though they're sounding like a coach with big open questions, it really is not targeted towards the agenda of the person who's asking for this help. It really actually comes into more or less their telling and maybe even driving their own personal agenda as they go through it. Now, having studied leadership over the years, there is a particular leadership style that if you look at the Harvard Business Review and a couple of others who've written about this, which is the expert leader. And, and the expert leader has a definite sort of slant to that individual. Particularly with that is the expert leader tends to lead in a way that is more of a driver in a lot of regards. But they also have this sort of little nugget inside of them that they really tend to only work well with other experts. And it doesn't matter who that other expert is. They could be an Agile coach talking to an expert in marine biology, and they feel that okay, I can carry a conversation with that person really well because we're both experts. And anyone that they perceive to not be the expert, they tend to go out of what we would in the coaching tone, asking the big open questions. They tend to identify the person across from them and say, well, they're not the expert, I'm more the expert. And then they tend to go more into a consulting role, but they use it in disguise of the coaching language to narrow the space, narrow the conversation, pretty much substituting their agenda for the agenda that the person wanted to go get accomplished. And I've noticed this trait that happens with coaches. And I think, to be honest with you, in talking about our craft and the way that we go approach things, I think that's not the best place for us to be as coaches. That's my personal opinion, and I'd love to hear what others think of that. So how do you deal with expert leaders? And this could be from a coach or anyone that you're dealing with within your organization. And then with that, are you one of them? And does this impact your coaching of an organization or an individual or others? Does that impact you? Does it find that because everyone that you're dealing with, the novices of the organization, do you find that might be hindering you in a particular way? And then what is the better way to coach? And this gets into a much broader discussion on this about how do we become self-aware that we might be leading that way? And then in particular, what are some of the better approaches to go take when we are coaching others? And so to kick us off on this, Deanna, do you want to take a first stab at this?
I get asked expert questions a lot, but I also have a coaching role. And when I think about this, I go back to, I don't know, a book that was written a long time ago. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was either by Ed Schein or Ed Lawler, one of those two, who described different kinds of consulting as expert consulting, which is the consultants that we hire to come in and tell us what to do. I think the example they gave was accounting consultants. They're just going to come in and tell you how to clean up your accounting processes. And then pair of hands consultants, which we all know as, groups of people you hire in to supplement your delivery team or whatever, often get called as consultants. And then the last one that they identified was process consultant. A process coach, basically somebody who brings in the ways of thinking about the issues and problems and aspirations of the organization to help them find their own answers. And I think that's what we call coach, Agile coach. That's a more up-to-date term. And for me, it's kind of interesting because I end up having to dance back and forth and figure out when is somebody just want me to answer their question about retrospectives, for instance, and just give them some idea of what I've seen done well other places or those kinds of things. And when do they really want me to help them improve their own capability around doing retrospectives, for instance, and I need to coach them through that. And so for me, the impact is that I need to dance back and forth and be open to feedback when I've landed myself in the wrong place. And with that, and so I deal with the expert leaders that I bump into. I try to deal with them with compassion because I know what that space feels like. But also, I want to do my own assessment about, is expert leadership what's needed in this situation, or do they just need an answer so they can move forward? Or are we trying to build internal capability and maybe work ourselves out of a job by giving them the coaching so that they are growing their own expertise and their own skills? Keeping that in mind, keeping that sort of curiosity about, what is it that this group of people or this person in front of me needs right now? Do they need answers, or do they need to help in growing their capabilities? Keeping that top of mind helps me not fall into the trap of being in the wrong place. And then I also get asked for mentorship as well. So I end up sort of dancing all around that Venn diagram that you had there. And what's just real briefly, in our local meetup, the Agile PDX meetup here in Portland, there's a small group of us who have been working on for a couple of years now, defining what we call Agile coaching qualities. And we have several areas that we are examining with regard to that. But the first two areas that have a bunch of different qualities listed under them, the ones that we think are most needed soonest have to do with a commitment to ongoing personal development and the ability to, in all kinds of ways of exhibiting the ability to encourage learning in others. And I think that's, at the most basic level, that's where a coach needs to be. They have to be a learner. They have to be understanding where they can build their own capabilities, and that helps them stay in a place, helps us stay in a place where we are more sensitive to the needs of others in that way, and then also encouraging learning instead of giving answers. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, so just a little bit of contrast in a couple areas. The building your own self-awareness, understanding that I'm doing it again, or I'm in the wrong spot. I mean, what are the things that you're seeking out when you've the probe that you put into the system that says, "Oh, I'm in the wrong spot"? How do you do that?
Well, it's sort of staying in that place where we know that there are choices. Learning what are the physical cues, what is my own motivation, what kind of motives do I see in others, what are my own intentions? Am I just looking for my own promotional path, or am I really here to support and encourage others? And also the other part of that is knowing the impact. Who shows up when you show up? And what impact does that have on the other folks? I mean, that's why I've had to become clear about, there are times when people get impatient if I don't show up as the expert. Well, for crying out loud, you wrote the book. Why can't you just give us an answer? It's like, well, let's figure out if an answer is what you really need here. And if it is, I'll try to supply one. But if what you want is growth and development, well, then let's try a different path. And sort of being able to developing my own ability to be able to discern between those two.
Sure.
And that requires that I also pay attention to protecting my own integrity and not being lured out of a space of my own integrity too, I think.
That's really good. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Jorg, what about yourself?
Yeah, lots of things that Diana shared I can relate to, absolutely. One thing that just crossed my mind as I was listening is that for me it's a big difference, especially in really discerning what is needed, whether I'm talking to an individual, which is much simpler than to talking to a group, because the group very often is more diverse than you would like to just take one role. You might even need to take different roles with different parts of the group, and then it's really hard to separate them fast enough not to lose one or the other. But one thing that I definitely find that helps is a lot of curiosity. So I always try to somehow stay curious why people are asking questions, why they may be thinking that I can answer to their problems before they even reflect what really is needed. So normally there is a story behind more or less every question, and if you have time enough to get to them, that brings you further. Definitely one thing I use a lot to get at least feedback is pick a story that is not exactly what they're asking for, but is related to this, to get an idea out there and start a discussion. And that sometimes gives very different results. So some people pick this up and say, yeah, I can think from here to there, and others say, this doesn't apply here. And then in both ways, you can just follow that train of thought, or you can ask, why isn't this applying? And then get the discussion. But one thing I always try to is to step back when I start to talk too much. That is a warning sign that probably I'm now in my own place, and that is what I'm trying to look for, to stop and separate. Sometimes people say, yeah, just go on, but then at least it's starting a new interaction. And one thing definitely, it makes a huge difference which kind of culture you're dealing with, how to approach this. So some people are very open with what they need and what they want, and for others, even sharing this is already a big burden. So I always try to at least understand where the people are that I'm talking to before really deciding on how I try to give them something helpful in whatever way. But definitely it was a long way or and hard effort of consciously reflecting to get away from always trying to be the expert leader, because in my mind this is the simplest thing. You have knowledge to lean on, and if you share it forcefully enough, you are in the center of things, but actually you shouldn't be, at least not all the time.
That's a very good perspective about not being in the center of the work. And I used to draw these diagrams about conversation. So I'd have if there were people in the room, I'd put a dot for every person in the room, and I would start drawing lines between. And I was one of those dots in there, and would just start drawing these little lines about who's kind of talking to whom, kind of spatially aware of the room. And I would notice that if my little dot, if that there was just lines coming from me, to your point, that maybe I need to yield. I need to step back into the coach's role here and start to help the rest of the people who haven't established a voice in the conversation yet, to allow them to be able to. So I appreciate that advice. That's very, very good. Shauna, what do you have?
Hi. One of the things that I have to be aware of is usually coach is not my only role when I'm working in organizations. So a lot of times as I've been working, it's been, challenging because I either have to wear one hat or another. So I think clarifying what hat do I have on right now is really important. a couple of words that have been brought up by both Jorg and Diana, which are being self-aware or encouraging learning in others. And I think there's a poster called that's Agile Coaching in a Nutshell. It was created by Dandy People that I like to use, and coach is one of those words that's being thrown around in a lot of different ways. And so when I'm working with people, I really want to align and make sure that what do you need me to be right now? Do you need me to be a facilitator? Do you need me to be a mentor? Do you need me to be a teacher, an expert? Or do you need me to be a coach? And in my definition of coach, it's helping you self-reflect on some things that are happening. What kind of person do you need me to be right now? You know, and I'm not sure that everybody wants to be coached. So you may show up one way and the other person that you're working with may not want to be, you know, for you to be that role at that time. And so being able to realize and be self-aware of what is it that this person needs right now is one way to not fall into that trap of sort of being that quote unquote expert. You know, and I also have to realize I'm not the right coach for certain people. So a lot of times somebody will start talking and I'll realize that we're not connecting, or that I'm not the expert in the area that they're looking to be coached in. And I'll say, you know what, there's somebody else that I want to introduce you to or connect you with that I think would be a much better coach for you at this time. And so that has actually served me really well, especially when I've been in a community at organizations that have multiple coaches, knowing that I'm not always the best expert or leader or coach for certain people. And, you know, also going back to, do they want to be coached? I think, are they in a learning mindset? You know, if people that you're working with tend to get very defensive, or you hear things like, this is the way that I've always done things, you know that they're in a fixed mindset at that moment, and maybe now is not the time. So maybe it's time to come back at a different point and have these conversations. And so that self-aware piece is really, really important when you're trying to coach folks. And vice versa, I also think when you're needing to be coached yourself. So yeah, that's some of my thoughts.
Cool. Mark, what do you have on this?
Yeah, so I was just kind of listening to I guess I was kind of thinking about the coming to the team or the conversations with an agenda piece. And I think I agree with everything that I've heard, but I would probably just augment a little bit with as a coach, I think in a way we all kind of, so there's maybe beneficial and not beneficial agendas, right? So a beneficial agenda might be, I want my team to communicate with each other. And maybe we have a team where, you know, folks are just interested in that. You know, they want to communicate. They want to have a kind of an open and honest dialogue with each other, and they want to work together and collaborate. And there might be another team where one or more team members don't want to do that, right? They want to silo. They want to come in every day, put their heads down, do their work, and go home, right? And so kind of coming to whatever team, whatever situation we're coming to, as a coach, I will have an agenda in a team like that, right? I want them to collaborate better. I want them to communicate. And if we end up in a situation where one or more of those people, it's just not their thing, and it never will be, well, then that's okay. Maybe there's a better place in the organization for them. But I do want to see that team, you know, perform well and also enjoy each other, enjoy their work, right? Develop a level of trust. So yeah, so I think I just wanted to kind of augment that a little bit by because I was just thinking, you know, there's this, yeah, I'm coming to it with my own agenda, which maybe isn't taking the team where they want to go, but there's also this kind of positive agenda, right, where I just want them to be
Sure.
be all they can be. Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking about that, I mean, most of us on the call here are Agile coaches, and Agile is the key word here. That individuals and interactions is one of the values. I mean, I think when we talk about the shared agenda, that sometimes some people they might not be fully bought in with individuals and interactions. And as a coach, as you know, we use different ways to help to facilitate and help to guide people towards that. So I don't think you're being disingenuous when we're talking about the larger social contract of what we're trying to say when we're doing an Agile adoption. By doing that, I don't know what do others think on this. I mean, Deanna or Jorg or Mark, if you wanted to add a little bit more to that.
Yeah, maybe if I can jump in, I absolutely agree that an agenda is natural. Everybody has some thoughts in his head anyway, but what is not okay if it's hidden or masked. So if I want people to communicate, I should make that clear to them in a way that they understand it, that I have a reason and what is driving me. I try to always talk about my personal motivation, what makes me do this stuff, that I want to see people go home happy and come back to work happy, and multiply this. That is driving me. So if something is contradictory, I will not like it just because that makes me less effective. And I think so it's totally clear to be there and have your thoughts and priorities. And if that doesn't match, like Shauna said, then probably somebody else can help more at that point. And only transparency and honesty will help here and get you the trust that you're not trying to manipulate people, because otherwise they will just take nothing at real face value anymore that you say. So that is of high importance.
Is that what you
I
meant?
like that.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
I'm sorry, Ray, I interrupted you.
No, I interrupted you. So sometimes when we do the open mic thing, it sometimes crosses over, but please go ahead and finish.
Yeah, I was just going to say I really like that, and I agree with that 100%. Yeah, I think that's right.
Deanna, when you were talking about managing your integrity, is that where we're getting into? Are we getting into that space a bit?
Well, I think the self-awareness comes first. I mean, you can't manage your integrity if you don't know what that is, where where your values lie, what kind of system beliefs you have, things like that. And then being in a place that values people working from their integrity, and where there's a good match around that, I think is also an important part of this. But that, we're not doing organizational coaching right now. We're talking so integrity has to do with, am I engaging from a place that where I feel that I can be on. I mean, maybe it's my psychological safety as part of it, is my psychological safety as a coach. Can I be honest in this situation? Can I say when, like the sociocracy folks say, I've got a twist in the gut, something's not right here. Can I ask questions around that? Can I set aside my own agenda and have it feel protected, know what my boundaries are around it, and feel protected, but allow other people's agendas to come to the fore where they're needed. And sometimes when I have worked as an individual, a coach for an individual, we spend weeks on figuring out how for them to kind of know their own integrity and know their own boundaries. And when those boundaries are being violated in one way or another, and the willingness to say, like Shauna said, this isn't an area where I can be most effective. and being willing to say that and know that you're still whole. I mean, I don't think we're saying that the expert leader, or, you know, for that matter, the pair of hands, is less valuable. They're just valuable in a different place, in a different way. And I think that's a really important piece of this. It's just because I'm not the right coach right now, or I'm not the right expert right now, doesn't mean I never am. It just, it's not a good fit. And that's why, and Jorg talked about it too, that's why the curiosity, the spirit of inquiry has to take a lead here. Is this the right place for me right now? Am I the best, and as Shauna said, am I the best person for this situation right now? And that's, being willing to ask those questions, I think, is an aspect of integrity.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the comments that somebody put into the question box, and I'm going to paraphrase it a little bit. If the person who put it in would want to join, they're welcome to raise their hand to give more contrast to this. But, you know, with the case of, and I've seen myself do this as well. So I happen to be working in a culture where everyone leads with the number of years experience that they've worked at the company, and then they lead with products and deliverables of things that they've done in the past, really to start the conversation to say that, look, I'm an expert here. And then they're setting the stage in the introduction to just in case you didn't know, I did these things. They're really cool and great. And I fall trapped to that all the time as well, which is when somebody does that to me, I reciprocate with all the things that I might have done as well in a similar space. And I think it's almost sort of the, you know, I think that's that blending or fitting in thing that we try to do as humans. And so when I think about within a group of expert leaders, I can fall into the trap of playing the expert leader as well. And I think sometimes, you know, the question that was asked is when we're managing up, when we're trying to establish, are you the person who really knows Agile? Or are you the one who really knows, you know, whatever methodology that you're trying to go drive within your organization? Is that approach, as far as when communicating up and when you're trying to go remove those impediments, is that the right place to be? And I'd love to hear what others have to think of that. Or is that just, am I just, you know, falling trap, I guess? How about Jorg? What about you? Do you think I'm falling trap in there?
No, I think you're quite right. That is, how do I put it? Maybe really situational awareness. And sometimes it's right to establish your experience, and sometimes it's even harmful because people shy away. So that is a fine line, and especially in situations where feedback is low because all the people around you have a lot of agenda, like in a big meeting where you're maybe at least perceived as not being senior. That is really challenging. What's the right way to get them? So in a lot of companies, you sometimes need a person from outside with somehow different expert leader stamp on the business card or whatever to tell the same truth that is internally known, but it just doesn't get heard. So
okay, I see that. So yeah, I understand that particular part, which is you're never a prophet in your own land. Yeah. And yes, there's sometimes through proxy, and I've played the role of the proxy of saying you need to listen to this individual because they have, you know, they in fact can help in this case. Which as I get older, to be honest with you, I think I play that role more because, at least for myself, it's like, yeah, I've already had my time on the stage, you know, type of thing. It's I want to help others to gain a voice in things. But even that could fall trap into maybe maybe you speak up more or not. One person also just said in the comment about just, you know, that synchronization with the individual you're talking to, that it's creating the sort of mutual confidence that you're the right person to talk to. But maybe sometimes we lead with that maybe too heavily. Brant, welcome to the call. What do you have to add to this?
So many times I hear, how do I coach up to people that aren't really invested in, transforming an Agile? Someone has told them, hey, you need to make your team Agile. You need to go do this to somebody, but not to me. And now you're in a place as a coach where you've done all that you can with the team, but now you've got to start, evangelizing outside of the team or outside of the sphere that you've worked in. And so that coaching up has really been a challenge, because the hardest part is kind of squashing your own consulting, DNA to say, I'm going to go in there and at least for me, I go in there and try and go through a lot of detail about Agile or something, and they kind of shut me down because they're the expert. I'm not the expert in their field, but they've been, like you said, in the business for this long and they've seen everything. And so how could I possibly, be needing to change, because it's the teams that need to change, not me. And so, and it's even harder when you have to come in with like an impediment or something that's needing their help with, because they might be the blocker. And I think one of the things that I've learned is trying to head them off at the pass, try and find those expert leaders, or even get a little bit of reconnaissance from other people to say, where are those expert leaders that are going to be kind of a tough nut to crack, and going in and just introducing yourself, meeting them, and really asking what is it that they value, what is it those expert leaders really do care about, because that empathy and some of that like emotional intelligence that was mentioned earlier at least helps you get to a place that you're on the same page. You may have different goals, but you've just kind of offered the olive branch to the expert leader to say, hey, tell me more about you. And how much of us love to talk about ourselves, right? So you've now engaged them to hopefully disarm a little bit into what they care about, and then ultimately finding out how, without going down a tangent and saying, I'm going to help you do whatever you want that may not be helpful to the teams or helpful to the transformation, but ultimately you're asking, how can I help? And the way that you can say, and you can help, is trying to meet their need as best as you can without, having to go past the boundaries of like, well, this is just reinforcing any anti-patterns that you've seen. So at least establishing that helps a team that when there is a crunch, there is a big problem, you've already established that relationship. You're not coming to that expert leader in a pinch and trying to, win hearts and minds in the stress of the storm. You've now established that relationship with that expert leader so that you're at least comfortable in saying, hey, I'm relying on the relationship that we've had in the past to help move and change the impediments that are coming.
Right. I think you bring up a number of really great points, which is, I think sometimes today we skip by the fact that what we're trying to really draw together is a relationship with the people that we're coaching and mentoring. And sometimes we just jump right into, this is how you bake it. This is it. And that we skip the relationship component part. So I think that's absolutely true. I think the other one though, which I think would be interesting to hear, and Shauna, I know you and I worked on this when we did the Business Agility Lab, is developing an empathy model for the person I'm talking to, because they have all these concerns and issues that they're dealing with, and you just happen to be walking in certain cases with yet another problem to that list. They're a little overwhelmed. I know, Shauna, did you want to add some contrast to that?
It's interesting. I was working on a team when we were sort of beyond the empathy, and the coach that I was working with at the time was the team was under a lot of pressure, went to the CTO and said, you are about to face mass extinction on this team. And those words sort of really, I think, engaged, and as you said, there may be times when we see that this is just another problem that we're bringing to the leadership, but I also see sometimes you have to put that shock to let people know that there's going to be a really big problem if we don't intervene and do something soon. And so while I think that empathy is really important and building those relationships, absolutely, sometimes depending on the scale of the problem, being able to coach up, as we've been sort of talking about right now, may require something that's that big of a statement in order to really pivot what it is that we're trying to do.
Speaking truth to power and being able to deliver those messages in a way that is going to get the attention. So when you think about that, and when you said mass extinction, I think that, you know, there's when do you overplay that? When's the possibility that that you don't get to be, and for people not in the U.S., I'm not sure if this is a common story out there, but you know, the henny penny that's saying the sky is falling, the sky is falling. Where do you draw that line?
Well, obviously you have to have some level of relationship and have built up trust so that when you say something like that, it is going to have impact. If you use those sort of statements too often, obviously it will be like the boy who cried wolf, right? It's just going to be like, oh, here we go again. More, you know, this is another very dramatic statement. When that's not the point. And so I agree, there needs to be some level of trust that you've already built up with the leaders that you're working with.
When we're raising concerns or other things, I mean, in most regards, it's, you know, we're still in that mode of, you know, how can we help them? You know, it's we're carrying the water for the team sometimes, and we're going through and we're helping them to gain a voice sometimes in forums and other places. And so that we're really trying to help them help themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious in just in the approach is, you know, when we bring the problem to bear, whether it be with the team or bring it with individuals, or even depending on where that individual could be, even the president of the organization, do we tend to want to fall back on the, hey, I'm the expert here in the room, and therefore let me tell you the 5 things that you need to go do? Or do we actually go into that the coaching tone and the coaching voice and help them to orient themselves to the problem, and then they're the ones that are going to solve it, not me as the coach?
Yeah, my thought is empathy actually goes both ways. So one thing is to empathize with the people you're coaching, but the other thing is as well to share that you're human, that you have emotions yourself, to open this up. And sometimes this only works if you go to their level. So if they are really proud of being expert leaders, then you probably have to show that to them, that you are on a level that they can understand, and then work from there, that actually this is not fully satisfying for yourself. So there is a development that takes them further, and then you can start to let go. So one very simple thing that I noticed a lot is just the simple thing in Scrum, that a lot of people think that product owner is a simple thing because in the dailies they don't tell what they all work on. And as soon as they start sharing this actively with the team says, oh my gosh, they have so much, so let's offload them. And if you get into this mode of discussion, of making them understand that actually what you're doing is hard work and not just simply telling them the story you've told 100 people before, then that might turn things around a lot, especially attention to small details that really matter to maybe even people in their orbit. So I found that sometimes talking to an assistant or somebody and getting their challenge with the leader and then giving them advice how to do this opens up a totally new door, because they can talk again on a different level and have an impact. So look around you and see who might be able to have empathy with your mission and your challenge, and use that as an open door that you can go through in both directions.
York said something really important there, which was knowing when to let go as a coach. That, how do you give it back to the group or the leaders that you're coaching, and then step back. And if they start dropping it, or if they start, struggling, like, that's part of the learning process. And I think that that's a really important point.
And I think one of the common threads that I heard, I think throughout everyone who's commented on this, is that we've all, I think, started to master, I think, our own self-inspect and adapt. Meaning that walking into all of these situations, especially when we're dealing with humans, no matter what we think of the person when we walk into that room, we sometimes don't know how they're going to receive what we say. And that kind of on the fly inspect and adapt, the probe, sense, respond pattern when we're dealing with complex things, and especially when humans are we're complex, that we need to be mindful of looking at that, that probe that we send out there, and that sensing, really internalize what we're reading from the room or the person or the organization, and that helps us to orient and to make a response that is appropriate. And maybe that's what, I think, Deanna, when you were talking about whether or not I need to know where I'm at, and then I know that I need to go shift into the consultant's role, or I need to go shift into the mentor mode, or to just the coaching role. And then one other thing, just to summarize on this, is being overt about what you're doing. There was a paired programming person that I used to work with, and he was pretty darn cool. He had sewn together 3 hats together. And one was red, one was blue, and one was, I forget the other color at this point. But when he was teaching paired programming, there's these 3 patterns you fall into. And he would like take this rim of this hat and he would like switch it over to, I'm now being this role. And he would do some work. And then when the role switched, he would take the hat and he would turn it to the other role. But he was being very clear to everyone that was around him that he was in that state right at that particular point, and being very open to saying that this is what I'm doing, which I think is really cool. So we are approaching the end of the year, which the end of the year for the Agile Coaching Network, we actually do a podcast 11 times through the year. I know you guys feel a little ripped off that we don't do the 12th, but the 12th one, to be honest with you, we sometimes an issue getting the several hundred people that come to the call. The end of the year, we've all got family and other things that are coming up. So it's something that it just occurs that we just decided a number of years ago. We do sometimes do a special podcast, meaning we will get with a group of people offline, and we don't do it in front of a live studio audience like we have here, or the rest of the coaches that come in and help to add their voice. But I haven't actually scheduled one as of yet. My goal is to get one going, and hopefully in January you'll hear a podcast that comes out of our December one. But for that, we also have right now Friday, November 18th. It's a little bit earlier because of some of the holidays. That is our next Agile Coaching Network. So it's not in the same orientation as it is normally in the month. And that will be our final conversation for the year. I do encourage that if you want to reach out and talk to any one of us, just send me an email note and I'll connect people. That's, I think, the one thing that we have available to us is to make sure that the conversation keeps going. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.